Okay. Well, thank you all very much indeed. The reason, the purpose of today is to welcome members and guests to the third meeting of the 2020 Standards, Procedures and Public Appointments Committee. And our first item today is for the committee to take evidence on the representation of the People Data Matching Scotland Regulations 2020 draft and the representation of the People Annual Canvass Amendment Scotland Order 2020. Now joining us today we have Graham Day, Minister for Parliamentary Business and Veterans, and with him are his officials Ewan McCaig, Maria McCann and Kenneth Pentland. I would like to invite the Minister to make a short opening statement, please.
Thank you, Convener. The current annual canvass process, I think we would probably all agree, is heavily paper-based, complex to administer, inefficient and confusing for some citizens. All round, I think it's probably summarised as a bit cumbersome. In light of this, we've worked with the UK and Welsh governments to modernise and streamline the annual canvass to ensure that it's fit for purpose for all of the elections that our citizens are involved in. I think the collaboration demonstrates the importance this government places on maintaining accurate and complete electoral registers so that our citizens are more readily able to participate in democracy. Ultimately, the reforms will give electoral administrators greater discretion to target their resources at properties where additions or deletions to the register are more likely to be required. It will make the annual canvass process simpler and clearer for citizens and maintain the completeness and accuracy of the register. The draft order being considered today paves the way for us to bring forward regulations in March to amend the annual canvass for the Scottish Parliament and local government elections. Turning to the data matching regulations, before the reformed canvass starts in July 2020, there are plans to run a one-off test in early March, which will effectively be a practice run of what will happen on an annual basis following implementation of the reforms. The purpose of conducting the test is to enable electoral registration officers to gain a better understanding of the match results they're likely to achieve in their area, and therefore how many properties are likely to be canvassed using the matched and unmatched property routes, and that will allow them to plan and budget accordingly. The reforms to the annual canvass have been consulted on and received strong support from stakeholders, including the Scottish Assessors Association and the Electoral Commission, and I would ask members today to add their support to this legislation so that we can continue to modernise our electoral processes, strengthen our democracy and hopefully facilitate greater voter participation.
Okay, great. Everyone fine with that? Okay, great. Thank you very much indeed. I'd like to invite some questions from members. Mark, I believe you'd like to kick us off, please.
Yeah, thanks. Minister, you mentioned about issues around simplicity and accuracy with the current canvass. Can you expand a little bit more onto what those practical issues are?
Okay, I'll bring one of the officials in to give you the kind of detailed answer on that.
Yeah.
Do you want to come on that, Maria?
Sure, of course. I think it's the process for annual canvass at the moment is set out very rigidly, and EROs have to actually follow a prescribed path which involves a certain number of communications and then followed by visits. And it's all paper-based. So one of the main things is to modernise it to enable for electronic communications to be used to reflect the way life's actually lived now. But also it's to give the kind of flexibility so that, well, first of all, the idea is that matching will be done as far as possible, and that will save having to communicate needlessly with people whose circumstances have not changed, haven't changed for a long time. And I think we've all experienced that. Why do we get this form through all the time? So that's, that's kind of main purpose. But it's really about modernising, making it more efficient, making it more friendly for the voter, but also maintaining the ability to communicate with people to check for the accuracy.
It's avoiding a one-size-fits-all approach, and the opportunity for voters to communicate if they so choose by providing a telephone number or an email address, and it will cut down a lot of the bureaucracy around this.
Yeah. And in terms of monitoring the pilot sort of rollout, if you like, is one of the objectives here to increase the numbers of people who are registering, and will that be monitored and what your expectations around that?
Well, but that clearly is the purpose, to have more people registering, which at least gives them or the opportunity to register. And this has been rolled out in sequence, starts in England, into Wales and Scotland. So over the next few months, we will develop a good feel for how this is working in practice. And as ever, happy to keep the committee appraised of anything around that.
Are there particular expectations that with certain groups, like students, for example, you get an upsurge in registration? I mean, is there a target for that, or is it very much let's reform the process and see what happens?
I think it's a case of reform the process and see what happens. We clearly anticipate there'll be an upturn. So students, you're right, would be one group, and perhaps care homes would be another where we'll see registration. But it's to encourage people to have the opportunity to vote. Thereafter, it's up to them whether they exercise that right.
Okay.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you, Minister. Gil Patterson, please.
Morning, Minister. I know the joint consultation was held between the 5th of October and the 30th of November, so I wonder to what extent the joint consultation that was held, and that was with the UK, the Welsh and the Scottish Governments, an effective way of consulting on the proposed reforms of this annual canvass.
Well, it's not a subject that attracts, if we're being honest, a huge degree of attention, but we did attract more than 80 responses across the UK, and in actual fact it was Scotland that led on this for the three governments. So our officials were very much at the forefront of this on behalf of the whole of the UK. But beyond that, we reached out directly to some of our own stakeholders. So the Electoral Management Board and the EROs in Scotland were also able to feed into this process as well. So there was a distinctively Scottish slant into that.
I see, so that was an addition to, yeah. Okay, thanks. You kind of second-guessed my second question there.
Oh, sorry.
No, don't say sorry, it was a good answer. That's what we're looking for, thanks.
Right, well, thank you very much for that. Maureen Watt, please. Thank you.
Okay. Can you explain a bit more as to what the purpose of allowing EROs to test the data matching process in advance of the annual canvass being initiated was about?
Well, we all know that with new systems, you sometimes have unexpected problems. So the whole idea here is to test it in advance, but for two reasons. One, to iron out any issues that might arise. Now, England and Wales they're ahead of us on this, and the information we have is that there were one or two minor problems that arose early on, but it's now working very effectively. But it's also, and primarily, to give the electoral return registration officers a feel for exactly what this will look like going forward, how many households are liable to be captured by the different approaches that will be taken when the full process begins later in the year. So that will leave them well placed at the outset of that to understand what the likely challenges are and to budget and allocate resources accordingly.
Okay, I think you alluded to the fact that you don't have targets, but you have got some idea, haven't you, of the number of households compared to the number of people who are registered. So have you got any idea of how many people should be on the register and aren't?
I'm going to refer that to an expert.
Well, it is actually quite a difficult topic to get exactly how many people. I mean, I'd have to say that that's not something we should come with a figure to you. But obviously, I think the committee perhaps looked at the Electoral Commission report on the completeness of the register recently. So there is quite a way to go. And everyone involved in registration is very much aware of that and their particular groups. At the moment, there's a consultation out on performance standards for the electoral registration officers, and the focus is more going to be on outputs and looking for them to consider what they're aiming for. So we could send a copy of that to the committee, and you can see that the direction of travel is going to be much more on focus of, you know, what are the outcomes, what's actually going to happen in terms of increases, etc. And perhaps that would help you to see that. We could send that on.
Okay. Do you want me to carry on, or?
Well, Mark has got something that's...
Oh, right.
No, I think
Did you have that covered at all? Well, sorry, Maureen, carry on.
Yeah,
please,
okay. Can you give me some idea of how confident you are, Minister, in the reliability of the DWP data set? And will this be part of the testing process foreseen by the regulations?
Okay. The DWP data set is actually fed into by, for example, HMRC, so it does appear to be quite robust. It's already used in the context of checking identity verification, and I think the figure of accuracy we believe is 90%. So we'd be optimistic that that will be a useful contributor to this process.
Okay, and in terms of security of people's data, you know, how robust is that?
We are fully conversant and compliant with the GDPR regulations. We can go into detail if you want on that, but clearly that's a very important aspect of this, to safeguard people's data.
Yeah, because, you know, we often hear of barriers to helping people because we can't share data between different departments, you know, to help youngsters, for example, you know, and yet we're sharing data with DW.
Okay, so let me give you one example. We've talked earlier about the use of email addresses and telephone numbers, but you would not be sourcing that information from another data set. It would be provided by the person completing the electoral form. So they would have to say, here is an email address, here is a phone number that you may use to contact us. So there's no way that you would be sourcing that sort of information from another data set. It's simply to double check, to confirm the likelihood that these individuals are resident in that property.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Can I just ask a quick question about the volume of business that this is going to generate? I mean, in terms of you're dealing between the ROs and the DWP and other bodies as well. There will be a large volume of data having to be transferred, and is everyone set up ready for that? Actually, you know, I mean, it's important that not only computers, but you've got enough staff and that you've got people of expertise to be able to deal with all that. Is it something that's going to be able to be introduced without unsettling the whole process which exists already?
Good point.
I think that's why the data, the testing step is very, very important. So that will give people a chance to see how things go. Everything's been very carefully considered and set up, taking into account all the points that you make. But once they have the test data, they'll then be able to budget and plan accordingly for the canvass in July.
Right, okay, thank you. That's very useful. Does anyone have any other further questions at the moment? Tom Mason, please.
Can I just raise the issue of uniformity with England and Wales? I mean, are there circumstances where, I mean, uniformity is ideal, but will there be any circumstances where Scotland will go its own way in some way?
You mean into the future?
Yes.
Well, I mean, there's any responsible government would take account of anything that came forward. Say, for example, from EROs. If through the process of this developing over a number of years, the people at the coalface were to come back to a government and say, well, actually, there might be slightly different ways to do this, better ways to do this, then of course a government would listen to that. But I suspect that would be the case across the UK, and it might actually be the case that suggestions that are coming from Wales are relevant to Scotland as well. So it's difficult to answer that in the long term. But we've taken the approach we have because it's the sensible, pragmatic one to take. And, you know, it certainly holds out hope for improving the registration system that we currently have.
And Jamie Halker-Johnson, then Neil Findlay, please. Jamie.
Thanks very much. Yeah, just a couple of things. I was just wondering if there's any geographical differences in terms of registration that this may address or may seek to address, and if so, how it would do that, particularly remote and rural areas, island communities, and the like. And the other thing was, the other area was the protection of newly enfranchised voters looking forward, whether there are specifics that would not only help to contact them and make sure that they're covered in this, but also protect some of the younger people who are coming onto the register, perhaps in advance of full involvement in the process.
Yeah. Well, to deal with the last point first about attainers, absolutely they're protected. Specifically, it's very important that we do that. With regard to your point about geographical, I suppose in many ways this, by its very nature, should bring about improvement in urban settings more immediately, because if you're thinking about student halls or residences, care homes, other properties that are regularly occupied by students. With regard to rural centres, have we done anything specific about those?
Well, I think it's about the ability to tailor the approach, and that will help in all settings. So, so particularly, you know, sending someone to visit a property that's very remote, which would have been compulsory before. Perhaps that won't be required because the other routes can be used. So I think it's about having more ability to tailor, and that will help in all the different settings.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And Neil Findlay, please.
Just one brief question, and I hesitate to ask it. Do we need any new IT? I hope not.
Well, we did talk about ironing out any issues, but we shouldn't.
Well, we don't know the absolute detail of the electric management systems that are used, but you know, the preparations have been made for the new approach. So it's not been alerted to us that there's an issue with that at all.
This has been very much informed in consultation with ERO, so all these are the kind of issues that are teased out.
Yeah, just well, don't need to go over the track record of failed and failing IT projects.
Thank you, Neil. Thank you very much. Yes, and Mark.
Will this save money? So I'm thinking about the costs of mailing and.
It's not about saving money primarily. Yeah. It's about making this more efficient. The Cabinet Office have got a projection that over the next 8 years, is it? There could be a saving projected right across the UK of up to £31 million, but that is a projection. So it's not, as I said to you, about saving money as such. It's about getting this better.
Thank you very much for that. Okay then, I'd like to, no one else, no. I'd now like to move, to invite the Minister to move the motion S5M 20563. This is agenda item 2, by the way, which is on your sheets here. So it's S5M 20563, and I'd like to ask the Minister to move this in his name, that the Standards, Procedures and Public Appointments Committee recommends that the Representation of the People Data Matching Scotland Regulations 2020 draft be approved. Minister, I'd like to invite you to move the motion, and if you wish to speak to the motion.
I'll simply move the motion, Convener.
To move the motion, thank you. Any committee members that they would like to speak any further on the motion? No, thank you. So, Minister, any closing remarks at all?
None, Convener.
None, thank you. Right, okay, so the motion, putting the question here, that the question is that motion S5M 20563 be agreed. Are we all agreed? Agreed. Okay, thank you. So the motion is agreed to, and therefore can I confirm that members are content with me signing off the committee's report on these regulations? Agreed. And thank you very much for that. Now, agenda item 3, the Minister is remaining with us, and on agenda item 3, oh thank you, and, I'd like to invite the Minister to move motion S5M 20564 in his name, that the Standard Procedures and Public Appointments Committee recommends that the Representation of the People Annual Canvass Amendment Scotland Order 2020 draft be approved. Minister, to move the motion.
Moved, Convener.
Thank you. And would you like to speak to the motion, please?
I'll leave it at that.
No necessity. Any members like to speak to the motion? No, thanks. Okay, any closing remarks, Minister?
None, Convener.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, so the question is that motion S5M 20564 be agreed. Are we all agreed? Agreed. Thank you. and so therefore the motion is agreed to. Right, can I confirm that members are content for me to sign off the committee's report on this order? Thank you very much. Well, that ends the public part of the meeting, and I'd like to thank the Minister and his officials for attending. Thank you very much. And thank you, Maria, for going through that. Okay, so we're moving into private session. Public will be leaving now, please. Thank you.